what value do you think that they serve? Like, why do they feel valuable for you?
Because I've seen them work in the last games I've described them to you before. Those games, and then played Costa Redondo versus Costa. It's the rival school, and we had really good energy on the bench and on the court. I didn't play, but I was on the bench, so I was cheering a lot.
Yeah.
For our team, and I could tell our energy, because in the first set we lost and our energy was bad on the bench. The second set, it was really good near the end when we started winning. And in the third set it was really high energy, so I just seen how it works and how the people on the court play better if you have good energy. So I think it's good to have good energy, so I'll always share that.
Yeah, 100%. So that's a concept I talk to a lot. I talk to athletes about a lot, is even at the professional level, I've always found it so interesting how the ebbs and flows in sports are so real. So a lot of times you'll have a pro team who's up by 20 points in whatever sport, football, basketball, baseball, volleyball. They'll be up by 20 points. And then in the third quarter, there's this surge when the team gets back from halftime, and they have a good flow, and then things get close. And in the fourth quarter, it's back and forth until somebody makes a game-ending play. And so I think at the youth level, a lot of people tend to think oh, that's just reserved for when people are young. People mature out of having these ebbs and flows and having these competitive rises and falls. But realistically, it's the world of sports and it's the world of life. When you can build momentum, things are going to go better for you. The percentages are up. So you being able to identify that when I'm bringing good energy and I'm bringing positive light and I'm smiling and adding vocals and not being selfish and just thinking about my position, the team does better. But what people also don't realize is when you do those things, you also up the percentages of you becoming a primary player, right? So for anybody who has spent any time on the bench, which I have for sure, there's times in life where we go through the experiment of, well, let me try to be pouty kid, and then let me try to be selfish kid, and let me try to be just quiet kid, and let me then try to be nagging kid, or whatever it is. Different people have different emotions, but ultimately the thing that works the best is always being able to be the person bringing positive energy and bringing positive light and giving compliments and good critiques and being able to help the team, because one, it shows your IQ, which ups your value, and then two, it ups the level of the team. And so if you end up being a person on a team who can raise the level, you stay on teams. The only thing that's going to boot somebody off of a team at the level that you're at is if they can't bring any value, that way. So again, foundationally, the biggest piece that we were talking about was when you start to think about developing, as a human being, whether it's athlete or in your life, having a really solid foundation is where we have to start. So that's where in the 6-phase process, awareness, when it comes to what's happening within me, before we ever consider, what's happening because of me or what's happening around me, we want to have that solidarity with what's happening within me, because that's the percentages go up of having all this chaos and all this randomness if we're focused on multiple things at once, or if we focus on them out of order. But if we can focus on one thing at a time and make sure that the foundation builds vertically that, that's what gives us the best percentages. So if you think about phase 0, sifting bricks, as it pertains to your goals, you pick out, I have these 1, 2, 3 bricks in my life, these things that I want to get rid of that are within my control. And then you start to look at awareness in each situation you're in, or the topic that we're talking about, volleyball, and you go, all right, awareness, how do I feel about my current volleyball state and my current volleyball experience? This is how I feel. I feel I'm a little bit in between. There's times where it's really fun for me. There's times where it's not as fun. There's times where I feel really motivated to play and times where I feel less. There's times where I feel really confident and good about my skills, and there's times where I feel less that way. So before I worry about how coaches see that, or how teammates see that, or how people are being affected by my mood and my demeanor and my presence, the first thing that you want to get locked in is what?
Yourself.
Yeah, you want to get locked in, feeling good yourself, right? Really putting that in your control, because the majority of us, we allow it to be left up to chance, or we'll take how we feel and then we'll just write off the rest of the day and say, well, that's just how I feel. I get that a lot. People will come in and originally, before we start working together, they'll say, today's just a bad day. And I'll go, why? And they'll bring up something that happened 5 hours ago. And I'll say, so what's your response to that? And usually they'll get a little bit stuck and go, oh, well, I don't really have a response. That's just how it is. And I go, imagine if you decided on that, you know? Like even if earlier today, let's say I would have gotten a parking ticket before I came to work today, or if I would have gotten in a light car accident, or if I would have not eaten, you know, breakfast or something like that, something that's unideal, I get to ultimately decide how I feel about it. You know, I can complain, I can whine, I can like act like it didn't happen, I can go, woe is me, I can choose that it's a bad day, which would be unwise, or I could go, okay, this is my scenario, and immediately whatever I choose is how I'm going to make it better, you know, how I'm going to keep it in flow. So the same type of situation applies to you in sports. It's like, if your team's not playing well, most people, like you said, they do what?
Like they shut down.
Yeah, they shut down, they go quiet, right? People think like quiet's going to solve something, or people will be like, I don't know what to say, you know? But that's where like great athletes are able to turn that corner. Because yes, with their play, they do skillful things and they can make plays, but it begins with belief. You know, it begins with that internal, like, no, we can turn this around. We can make this better. We can go up from here, not, you know, mailing it in and going, oh, it's done, or I'll move on to the next set. You know, that's the difference. And you see that at a youth level and at an adult level. You know, I've dealt with a lot of adult athletes who I work with, and before we start working together, they'll do things like get in the middle of a set and be down and say, okay, we'll just give this set away and then let's move on to the next set. And that mentality, you know, is not designed for anybody who wants to become a champion. It's like, you always have to be willing to decide that you have a chance, you know, if you are involved. If you're involved, if you are a person who can give communication, if you're a person who can give physical touch, if you're a person who can give like the belief mentally, then there can be success, you know, from where you are currently. So second piece of awareness, why is it in that order? What's happening because of you?
Because like whatever is happening inside of you affects your emotions, and then your emotions, like if you're mean to someone, that's something that happened because of you. So like you need to like know your intentions, and you need to know when to say things or not to say things within you, so then if you do say them, then things don't happen like that because of you.
Right. So if we were going to take on the ideology of, you know, awareness and say, okay, phase one, what's happening within me? All right, I got that. I have a good feeling toward it. I'm putting the energy toward making myself feel better about these situations that are unideal. Now, what's happening because of me? If I were to ask you, does that mentality come from the standpoint of a leader or come from a follower? A leader, right? So what's happening because of you is the standpoint of a leader, because they're looking at the way that their action is affecting other people. You know, that's what leaders do. If you are the captain of a volleyball team, how you show up and how you communicate and how you get the group together and galvanize will ultimately set the tone for how other people do. If you're the owner of a business, your punctuality and your timeliness and your energy and your effort will set the tone for what other people do. But if you're a person who goes straight on to the third piece, which is like what's happening around me, and you start to pay a lot of attention to, well, what's the environment like? Well, what are the other teams doing? Well, what do people normally do here? Then you generally sink to the mean. You know, you just become like the group. So if you have a group who's, you know, less than ideal, or you have a group who's a little bit toxic, or you have a group who's just average energy or average effort or average talent, you'll be that way. You know, but ideally, if we're trying to become our best, you want to always be pushing toward outside of average. You want to be pushing toward the max, you know, and the way to max is you're going to have to be willing to take on a leadership role. The reason is most won't. You know, most people, when things get challenging, they'll scurry away. They'll like all of a sudden be hard to reach. So you would like to be the person who, when things get challenging, so your team is down, it's early in the morning, it's late at night, you've had a long week, the team has some sickness, you rise to that occasion. You know, you like literally verbally go, perfect. I'm glad we're in this situation. This gives us the opportunity to prove we can do hard things, right? But most people are going to do what?
Just shut down.
Yeah, they'll just shut down. They'll just bail. Like, they'll just kick out, you know? And that's where the decision comes in. You know, a lot of people will make statements like, well, I'm just not that way. Or, oh, it depends. Or, oh, well, the sun didn't come out. The grass was slippery, whatever. Like, those things are not within our control. So there's 0 point in even putting any energy into them. You know, it doesn't fall within a brick. Like, a brick is something within our control, right? So we want to be paying attention to sifting bricks, which is the things that are within our control. So what's within our control is always our response to these things. Okay, the grass is wet. Perfect. I'm going to make sure that I'm better in this situation when the grass is wet than the opponent who's also playing on wet grass. If it's a situation where you're like, oh, the opponent is up, they're ahead, and the rest of the crew is like starting to dip, or they're starting to drop their chest, or they're starting to like shrug their shoulders down, you're the person who's like, I'm going to make sure we all lift this and we all believe in the possibility of us recovering from this or responding to this, right? That's just a different thing that most people aren't willing to do. It's why leadership is so valuable. That's why leadership is so valuable. Like, from 100 years ago, 200 years ago to now, the most sought out thing, the most sought after thing, the most valuable thing on any team, business, family is great leadership. You know, if you have great leadership, you're always going to be able to serve value, regardless of your physical ability. So whether you were 6'3", 200 pounds, or if you were 5'1" and 98 pounds, like, if you have leadership, you give yourself not only an opportunity to make teams, but you give yourself the opportunity for your team to have like result-based success, you know, to win more frequently. So if you had to say, like, right now with that order, like, how do you feel about it, and like, where do you feel like you fall with those things, like, in your daily life? Awareness specifically.
I think I'm not very good at it, just because like I'm mainly focused on like what's happening around me, and like the examples that you use, like, I do that a lot, where I like blame it on things I can't control. So yeah, that's like, I'm like not very good at that, and I always think about what other people are thinking first, and just like blaming it and like making excuses and stuff.
All right, well, I appreciate the honesty for sure. Now, how do you believe that you flip something like that? How do you get to the other side of that?
I guess I could just like think to myself like, oh, like, this is something I can't control, so it was already there, and like there's nothing I can do, and just like thinking to myself like, you know, like things that help the situation, to be like, the grass is slippery, I didn't make it slippery, I can't do anything about it. Or like, if something's happening, it's happening, like, that's okay. And if people are like doing things like I can't control what they're doing, they make me feel bad, like, then I shouldn't feel bad about it, because I can't control what they say.
Right. Well, how you start ultimately, you did hit it, but it's just second in line. So thinking is really valuable. But if you think back to the times you've gone through in life, how often have you, I like to call it in a vacuum. So like when you're sitting in your room, or you're sitting in a session, or you're like talking something over in the car on the way home, when you're in a vacuum, it's really easy to be logical, right? It's really easy to go like, hey, just make what they say not matter. Who cares what they say? It's real easy, like when we're in a vacuum, to make things seem so easy. But it's like in the moment is when it's more challenging, right? If we step back from the sports court, it's really easy to say, yeah, if the block is in the angle, hit here. If the block's there, hit there. If the serve goes there, do that. That's why like people from the stands always seem to have really big opinions and like be just experts on the game, right? You should have done that. How'd you miss that call? You know? But when you're in the moment, it's usually not as simple as that, because it's not in a vacuum. So how we start to create essentially a vacuum, even when we're in real time, is a certain style of practicing. And so when we practice, most people think like yourself, and they go like, you know, I just got to think about it. But realistically, like, thinking's usually not enough. And at this point, thinking's not the first step. So the first step is speaking, you know, it's saying. So us human beings, we have a very challenging time, generally speaking, when it comes to pushing ourselves outside of a comfort zone. You know, from a young age, we become very comfortable with the things that we know. Hey, this is the food I like to eat. These are the places I like to go. I will fly on planes. I will not fly on planes. I like heights. I don't like heights. There's very few people who you encounter who on a daily basis are looking to push the limit, you know? And I don't mean in a like XXX, you know, let's jump off cliffs and do wild stuff. You know, if that's your preference, that's your preference. But I mean just in like daily life stuff that isn't even physically dangerous. So, for example, for somebody to yell, like in an environment that promotes yelling, so like a sports environment. Hey, I'm talking to my teammates, I'm yelling what's gonna happen, I'm giving energy and congratulations. There's a lot of people who, if you ask them to role play something like that without other people around, they'd feel very uncomfortable. You know, so if I were to ask you to do that right now, if I were like, okay, for the next 3 minutes, like you and I are gonna practice yelling at one another as if a play just ended. Like your first thought would probably be like, sounds uncomfortable. Like, but ultimately that right there is like the decision that if we made on a daily basis. And when I say the decision, I'm saying the decision to be able to state things, like put it on the table, say it out loud. Because when things are just in our head, they usually stay in our head. Like things must start to get promoted outwardly. So for example, if I really want to believe in myself as a great trainer of mentality, I have to be willing to say out loud, I can train mentality at a high level. It can't be like this secret in my head, or less people will find out. Sure, the few people who would encounter me, they might put in a little buzz, they might drop some word of mouth around. But if I really want to help multiple people, I would have to be willing to say, this is what I do, this is how I do it, this is how you get in touch. I'd have to be able to say that. And then when I say that, I would have to make the decision not to care if there's people who say, yes, that's great, we absolutely love that. Or if there's people who say, that's stupid, or that's this, or that's that, big opinion. It's like literally making a decision that that opinion is not going to matter. Only whose opinion matters. Yeah, the person who's promoting, the person who's putting their best foot forward and taking a chance. So as long as your intention is good with what you're doing, choose leadership. You know, that's the ultimate point. Is like, if you're right now saying you're not very good at basically believing, you know, that things are going to go well, or things can turn around, or that you are at the advantage when things are hard. Like, the grass is kind of wet. If you're usually the person who's like, see, that's why we didn't win. The grass was wet. Or, oh, practice started late. We didn't even practice yesterday. That's why we lost. I hear a lot of that. We didn't even practice yesterday. That's why we lost. I go, you've taken over 5,000 repetitions this year of your sport. One day of practicing or not practicing does not decide win or loss. Now, does practicing up your percentages of winning? Yes. But one day of not practicing does not decide win or loss. And a lot of times, if you go into a scenario like that and you lose, if your next thought is, well, this is why we lost, and the next thought isn't, okay, I have some work to do, then the percentages of you losing again go up or down. The percentages of you losing go up. The percentages of you losing again go up. So if you're in a scenario where you're like, hey, I just lost, now let me find somebody to pin it on, your percentages of losing again go up very quickly. But if you lose and you go, all right, this is exactly what I want to work on, this is what I felt like I could have got better at, so I'm going to go get better at it, your percentages of winning and responding go up. So just literally use that same formula for life. If you're like, right now, you know, I end up in these funky friendships because people just say whatever they want to me and I just like take it and then try to like be the middleman who makes everything okay, and people keep doing that, just change the action and start to go, okay, you're not going to say whatever to me, and I'm not going to say whatever to you, but you're not going to say whatever to me. I'm going to make sure there's a standard here, and you're very aware of what said standard is, and then let's see what happens after that. And all of a sudden, the value goes higher. It's the reason that if you look at merchandise, if I just ask you this quick question, you have to answer, what's more valuable, Louis Vuitton or Target?
Louis Vuitton.
Okay, so like right off the top of your mind, and you don't know the manufacturer of Louis Vuitton, you've never met them, you've never been inside the factory of who makes a Louis Vuitton bag versus a bag you get at Target, generic brand, but the reputation is that, hey, this is quality and there's a really high standard here. And Target does their thing, Louis Vuitton does their thing, but your mind tells you there's a really high standard here. So when people come into a scenario knowing that and thinking that, they act different. They button up. They get it cleaner. So if I'm out on the beach today, I did my workout like I told you out on the beach. If I'm out there and I go, all right, I'm just gonna talk in between all the reps and I'm gonna like, you know, keep it super slow and I'm gonna like make excuses and like complain and apologize, the training's probably gonna be average or worse. But if I go in my head, okay, I have this quick thought, like I'm tired, and out loud I go, but I can do it. I can do it. I'm gonna push through. I'm gonna make it happen. It's all good. We're in good shape. That will become more of the reality. It's not that there's not some reality to being physically fatigued. It's not that there's not some reality to having sleep deprivation if somebody's not sleeping, or having an emotional reaction if somebody says something unkind to them. But then response is where it becomes primary. You know, the way that you respond that's the whole deal. That's like the make or break, how you respond. So I don't know anybody who's ever been a champion who's never been down in a match. Like there's nobody who you've ever met who's like, that person's never experienced being behind. But champions are made when the chips are down, right? And so there's multiple types of championships. There's championships you can like hold a trophy and go like, yeah, we won the whatever, AYSO Cup. And then there's championships of like life that make you feel like, frick, I just got to a new level and I feel like elated. I feel like open, you know, stronger, free. Those are the ones like totally worth pursuing, in my opinion. Like you as a human being, if you can get to feeling that, it's like done deal.